everyone, Eunice here. Today we are finishing up with our seasonal girls and we are drawing an autumn girl. So grab your pencil and let's begin. Today we are starting by deciding what kind of canvas we're going to be using. So we are using a standard square canvas from Procreate with pixel width and pixel height to 2048 pixels. DPI 300, color profile set as sRGB with this low number. When it's all done, hitting done, taking a look at our new canvas. And then before starting to work onto our illustration, let's go under the project area tab and we will download all the materials mentioned for this tutorial. When you did it, firstly, let's go and select the brush that we're going to be starting with. So go into the brush library, go into this brush that you downloaded with the title Dull Flat Pencil. Of course, if you want to use any other brush, for example, from the sketching folder, you are welcome to use it. When you are done picking up the brush, let's go to our layers and we'll go to the background color. We'll go to this color palette that you downloaded and we are going under palettes on the bottom and under cards on the top to see the colors names, and we will select the color with the title background. Now when our background is not white anymore, let's go to our actual color palettes, and again we are going under palettes on the bottom, under cards on the top to see the colors names, and let's start by picking the color that will be quite contrast onto our canvas. For example, let's go with blush lines color. Now when we are all set, we are starting with a little scheme that will help us to build up our illustration. So we'll need to have some proportions onto our canvas to build up our face and everything, and we will start by defining the center of the canvas firstly. So go into our top firstly, and with one line going down and creating a line going in that way. So going through the center, holding our Apple Pencil at the end of the line to make the line straight, and also holding one of our fingers on the screen to make it even straighter. Now we will need to make sure that this line is positioned in the center, so we will go to our arrow key on the top left. We will go under the uniform method, and also we will go under snapping right here. Into the settings, we will turn on snapping too. Now we will go to the canvas, we will hold our Apple Pencil and we will be looking for the orange line that is going from top to the bottom, and we will need to position our orange line onto this guiding orange line. So when you did it, when your line is at this orange line of the guidance, we will go straightly to our layers and we will create one more layer by tapping on the plus icon. Now when we have the second layer, we will do the same thing, but this time on the horizontal axis. So going to the left, starting to create a line going like that, holding it at the end with our Apple Pencil and holding one of our fingers on the screen. Again, making sure that the line is in the center by going to our arrow key, uniform method, snapping is on, going to our canvas and holding our line and looking for the orange line that is going on the horizontal axis this time. So positioning this line onto the line of guidance, and when we are done with it, again straight away go into our layers to merge these two layers together. Go into the layer on the top, which is right now selected, tapping on it and using the option merge down. Now we will go toward the plus icon and we will create one more layer, so we will be able to create a couple of more lines of guidance. Let's go to our color palettes one more time to select some contrast colors. So for example, let's go with here deep shadow something, and with this color we will go and create a couple of more lines that will be horizontal that later on we will use for our illustration. So firstly, let's go toward the top and toward the bottom, and we will define where we are not going to be creating any details. So we will need to have some spare space. Let's go over the top firstly and create a line going in that way. Hold your line at the end, hold one of your fingers on the screen. We will need to have a bit of space right here. If you want, you can go to this popped up option line on the top. This is our editing mode. You can see we have some notes right here. We can hold our Apple Pencil and we can move this line up or down. So we will need to have a bit of space. So for example, something like that. When we have it, we will tap on the screen to accept the changes and we will do something similar on the bottom. On the bottom, we will need a bit less space. So firstly, let's go and create our line the same way as we had it onto the top. And again, holding our line with our finger and with our Apple Pencil. If we need to move it, go into the editing tool by tapping on the line option. Move the line up or down, have a bit less space than you have on the top, and when we have the result that we need, let's tap onto the screen to accept the changes. Now, when we dealt with what we have on the top and on the bottom where we are not going to be putting anything, we will go towards the area where we will add something, and we will need to create a couple of more lines right here that will help us with it. So firstly, let's go and define where we will put our eyes. We will go to this line that we have in the center, we will go slightly higher higher than this line is, and we will create another line going the same way as the previous line. So holding our line, holding one of our fingers on the screen. If we need to move it, go into the editing tool and moving it. So we will go a little bit higher, and we will have the line positions some kind of in that way. When we have it, tap it on the screen, and we will need to add another line, but right now underneath this line that we have in the center. So we will need to have the similar space that we have right here onto the top, but we will need to do it onto the bottom. So let's go again with our line like that, holding our line at the end and creating our line in that way. If we need to move it, going toward the editing tool and moving it in that way. If you need to try it out one more time, if you accidentally accepted it as I did, try it out one more time. Again, if you need to move it, try to make the similar size that you have onto the top. When you are done, tap on the screen to accept the changes. And let's go and write down eyes into this area. So we will go and do it in that way. Creating a little line and writing down eyes. Now, when we have the eyes area, let's go toward the top and we will find the center of this area with another line. So going like that and creating another line going through the whole shape. Tapping, holding, go into the editing tool if we need to move it, trying to position it straightly at the center. When we have it, tapping on the screen, and we will go toward this top part right here, and we will write down here. Now, when we have the area for the hair, let's go toward the bottom, and we will again create the half line right here, so going through the whole center and creating a line like that. Again, if we need to move it, moving it up or down, trying to position it at the center. And when we have it, we will go toward this area on the top and we will make the half line here too. So going like that, creating another line, going, holding, trying to position it at the center, and onto this line that we've created the last, we will go and write down chin. Now, when we have all of these lines, we are done with our scheme, so we can go and prepare our little layers that we have right now for the sketching part. So firstly, let's go toward our layers, and if you want, we can make the lines a little bit less visible, so more transparent, so it's not too disturbing for us later on. We can tap onto the N icon onto this layer, and we can go to the opacity slider to reduce the opacity. So you can find the level that works for you, and when you are done, we can do the same with this layer that we have for this cross. So if you want to adjust it, go to the N icon, go to the opacity slider and reduce the opacity. Now, when we're done with it, let's tap onto the layer and let's create one more layer on top to prepare it for our future sketching part. So let's tap onto the plus icon, and to finish up with the preparations, let's also go toward our color palettes and let's select the color that will be quite appropriate for our sketching part. So for example, let's go with some darkish brownish colors that we have right here on the top. Select one of them, and when we're all prepared, let's start sketching. So to start with our sketching, we will need to define where is going to be our face. Let's go towards the lines that we have right here for the bottom part of the hair and the line that we have for the chin, and right between these lines we will create a shape of the circle. Hold your line at the end when you're creating the shape and hold one of your fingers on the screen to make sure that you are creating a circle. You can adjust the size by moving your Apple Pencil while you are holding everything right here. So try to position it in that way, and when we have the result like that, we will again need to make sure that this shape is straightly positioned in the center. So again, we are going to our arrow key, uniform method, snapping is on, holding our line, our Apple Pencil at the end of the line, and we are looking for this line that is going from top to the bottom. It might be orange, it might be this blue one, and when we have the position like that, let's tap onto our arrow key to continue to work onto our face. So now, as we have the base, let's go towards the area where we have the eyes, so to these two lines, and from the top line or from the middle line, we can go down and we can create the line that will kind of look like a cheek right here. So let's go like that and create something going like that. When we have it, go into the opposite side and trying to create something similar here too. Doesn't need to be perfect. When we have the result like that, we can go and erase this line that we have right here for our bottom part of the circle, or if it's not bothering you, you can keep it as it is. For example, we can grab our eraser and make it disappear. So for example, if you don't want to erase it completely, you can go and make it a little bit more transparent like that. When we have the result like that, let's get back to our brush and let's start by going toward our area where we have the eyes, and we will create these eyes. So for the eyes, what we need to know, we have the eyes on the sides, right? And we will need to have some distance between the eyes, and this distance might be as one eye right here onto one of the sides. So on the face, we could have 3 eyes and they will be like one after another. So we'll need to have 3 equal parts right here. Let's go toward the middle from this line that we have, and we will create 2 lines going in that way on both sides, and we will need to have the equal space right here between these elements. Now, when we have 3 equal parts, we will go over one of the sides and we will create only one eye right here. So for example, let's go toward the left and we will go toward this area where we have 2 lines for our eyes, and we will start by creating a shape of the circle or ellipse. So let's go with one line and create a shape going in that way. Going a little bit lower than the line that we have on the top, holding our line in the end, go into our editing tool and adjusting it. So as you can notice, in the editing mode, we have the nodes. That means that we can go to them with our Apple Pencil and we can adjust our shape right here. So we can go to the nodes, we can make our shape smaller, more rounded, less rounded, it's up to you. What we need to achieve right here is a bit of space right here on the top between the line and the line that we have for our guidance and the line that we have right here for our shape of the iris. So when we have the position like that, let's tap on the screen and we will go and create the shape for our future eyelashes. So we are starting by going toward this area that we left between the line that we have for our guidance and our line that we have for our actual iris, and we will go a little bit lower than this line that we have on the top. And firstly, we'll start and try to repeat the overall shape that we have onto the bottom. So we are trying to create a parallel line to what we have onto our iris. When we have it, we will continue by going down and starting to create a more open line. So overall, we are creating a curve, but we are going a little bit outside the shape like that. So when we have the result like that, we are going with this line toward this line that we have on the bottom, but we are not touching it. So we will keep a bit of distance right here. When we have it, we will need to add a bit of thickness right here. So let's go and start to do that by going a little bit lower like that. And we will go and create a line that will go in that way. So we can go with a straight line, we can go with a bit of the curve. We for now are mapping out what we are doing, and when we have the tip like that, let's go and connect it with the shape that we have on the top. So again, going like that, starting to create the shape. You can experiment a little bit, you can create a differently curved element right here. You can make it thicker, you can make it thinner, shade it straight away so you see clearly what you are doing. You can go and zoom out your canvas to see again clearly what you are doing right here, whether you want to go maybe thicker with the shape or thinner with the shape. So experiment a little bit, create the overall shape that looks like that. You can go over the top and maybe change the curvature a little bit so you have a bit of a different facial expression right here if you want to. Again, if you want to go along the bottom part and maybe soften it up or create a different curvature right here, it's all up to you. You are welcome to go and do that. You can go toward this tip and make it softer too. So spend some time here, create the shape of the eyelashes that you would like to see right here. And when we have the basic shape, again, it doesn't need to be perfect, we can fix everything later on. When we have the general shape, we will go outside the shape of this lash that we've created, and we will create the actual lashes. So let's go along the shape that we've created, along the outside part, and we will go and create very nicely looking triangular shapes going in that way. Again, you can go with the bigger shapes, with smaller shapes, with different sizes. You can go with different position of these elements, different, I don't know, everything different if you prefer. You can work with your brush and work with your eraser, probably with the smaller size of it, and adjust the overall look of what you are creating right here. So it's up to you. You can go a little bit outside the shape if you prefer with the shapes too. When you are done with creating these lashes, let's take a look at everything, decide whether we maybe want to go manually and adjust some parts. For example, maybe we can go toward this little eyelash and create it in a bit of a different way by going toward the bottom and creating it in a softer way like that. So again, you can experiment, you can lower this little part right here, go a little bit more inside the shape of the eye, work with your brush, work with your eraser, create slightly different shape if you prefer. So spend some time here, create something that you would like to see. And when we have the result like that, when you're overall satisfied with your eye, let's get back to our brush and let's go toward this part right here, toward the bottom part of the iris. And we will create half of the ellipse like that. You can go smaller, bigger with the shape, it's up to you. When we have it, we also will go above the shape that we have for our main shape for the lashes, toward this line that we have right here, and we will create the lid right here. So again, trying to create a similar shape to what we have for the top part of this eyelash and the top part of the iris, just creating a line going in that way. Now, when we have the result like that, if you are satisfied with it and if you don't want to create something else or adjust something else, let's go and make a copy of it and position it onto the opposite side. So to do that, we will need to go to our instrument icon over the top left. We will use the freehand method on the bottom. We will use our Apple Pencil and we will go along this whole shape like that, and we will select it by going along the shape. Connect it right here when only this element is selected, when it's more wide than everything else outside. Let's use 3 fingers. We will swipe them down from top to the bottom and we will invoke this copy and paste menu. So firstly, let's hit copy and then one more time 3 fingers, swiping them down using the option paste. Now, when you have this bounding box and this little window on the bottom, that means that we've made a copy and we can go toward this bottom window and we can use the option flip horizontal right here. When we did it, let's move the shape toward the opposite side and we will try to position it on the same level and on the same place. You can go along this line that you have right here. It's barely visible, but you can find it. So you can position it on the same line and on the same place that you have your previous eye on. And when we have the position right, let's tap onto our arrow key on the top left to go away from this mode. And then we also will need to go to our layers and we will need to merge these 2 layers because we've created a copy on a separate layer. So you can see this inserted image layer, we can tap on it and we will use the option merge down. Now, when we have the eyes done, we can go towards the middle part between the eyes and the middle part right here of this bottom area, and we can create a little mouth right here. So let's go and create a very simple mouth, like a smile like that. You can go with a bigger size, smaller size, different facial features, of course, if you want to experiment. Work with your brush, with your eraser, and adjust it to your liking. So now when we have the result like that, we can get back to our brush and we can go toward this element right here where we have the outside parts of our face, and we can go and map out where we want to put the ears. So let's go a little bit lower than the shape that we have for our eyes, and we can go and create the very simple shapes of the ears like that. Smaller, bigger, it's up to you. Now, when we have the result like that, we have the base for our face, but we also can go a little bit higher than we have the shapes for our eyes and create the future eyebrows. So for example, let's go and map out where we want to put them. So we will need to have like half size of the eye right here going up. So you can map out like that and then put a little eyebrow on the top and doing the same onto the opposite side. So trying to position it on the same level. Of course, if you want to go with the different shapes for your eyebrows, you are welcome to go and do that. Now, when we have the result like that, we can decide whether we want to go and work a little bit onto the boldness or onto the bottom part. So for example, to finish up with the face, because right now it looks a little bit weird, we can go and create the bottom part firstly. And as we are creating an autumn girl, let's go and create a little bit of the scarf right here. So for the scarf, firstly, we will go toward the middle line that we have right here. We will go toward this line that we have for our chin, and we will go slightly higher and we will start to create the line going in that way. So let's go with a big shape going in that way. We will need to have a bit of the not too rounder of the shape right here onto the side, and we will go down and create some kind of the line going like that. So we are creating the fold, the part that will go in that way. Now, when we have it, we will go toward this end that we have and we will go and start to create the line going in that way. So let's go outside like that, and then we will create a bit of the hook going in that way, and then on the bottom we will create a line going in that way. So again, you don't need to be perfect with the lines. You can create a couple of lines and then decide which ones you want to keep and which ones you want to erase. When we have the result like that, we will go toward this little part and we will start by stepping a bit from the line that we have already, and we will create a little bit of the line going in that way. When we have it, we will go and try to create a similar line to what we have outside. So we are creating the continuation of the shape, we are closing it up, and when we have it, we will go toward the end that we've created right here, and we will create some free little ends right here too. So for example, firstly, let's go and create the line that will go in that way, and then we will connect it with the lines that we have on the top and create a couple of lines going like that. So you can experiment a little bit with these details that you are creating. You can go with some free little elements like that. You can create them in the different directions and everything, create some movement right here. When we have the result like that, let's continue by going to the sides and we will create the different parts of our little scarf. So firstly, let's go toward the areas that we have right here outside. So we are going a little bit outside the shapes that we have for our ears. So going a little bit farther away, and we will start by creating a little bump going in that way. When we have it, we will go slightly lower and we will create another bump right here. You can go and make them similar size-wise or a little bit bigger on the top, a little bit smaller on the bottom, or in any way that you prefer. When you have it, we will need to do something similar onto the opposite side too. So here it will be a little bit hidden probably, so we will need to go and create it going in that way. Now when we have it, let's go and connect them and we will create the parts of the scarf right here. So going toward this little part and we will need to connect it in a way that it is going like to this part where we have a little bump right here. So we are creating a fold. So creating some kind of the slope right here, and when we have it going toward the bottom, and we are again connecting everything that we have on the side with what we have right here into the inside part. So creating something going like that, going a little bit higher right here onto the right than we have it onto the left, so some kind of the like again folding right here. And when we have it, we will go and kind of continue creating this line that we have on the bottom right here on the top, so in the middle part that we have right here onto the side. So creating it in that way, trying to make the line kind of seamless, and then going toward this part and finishing up by creating a curve going like that. If you want, you can grab your eraser and erase all of these overlapping parts that you don't need, so it's not looking weird or weird. We can go to our brush and we can go and add a couple of lines right here. So for example, we can create a little fold to this little part. Again, if you want to maybe manually go to some other areas and adjust them, make them bigger, make them smaller, it's up to you. You are welcome to go and do that. You are welcome to create the fold that you have onto the sides, maybe in a bigger way. Work with your brush, work with your eraser, adjust the parts to your liking. When we have it, we also will go toward this area where we have like the part right here onto the scarf, and we will go and create the second end of our scarf. So we will need to go toward this little triangular shape. We will go toward it. We will go with a line going in that way. We will create a smaller shape. Going toward this part, going toward this little bottom part, and trying to create the line that will be quite parallel to this line that we have right here onto the main shape of our scarf. When we have it, going for this little parts that we have as a free parts. So again, start by creating a line going on the bottom and then create a couple of these details over the bottom part. Again, if you want to create some movement, create some movement. If you are okay with the like static thing, you are welcome to keep it static. When we have it, let's go toward our scarf and let's finish up with it by creating some pattern. You can decide what pattern you want to create. If you want to go what I'm going to be going with, let's go and do it. We will go and create some lines right here, and for the lines we need to think as our shape right here is not like this super straight, so we will need to go along the whole shape that we have right here. So for the lines, for example, let's go with something going like that, and we are creating some kind of the parallel lines to what we have outside. So not straight lines, going with slight curves like that and creating the pattern going in that way. When we have it, I also want to go right here to the middle and maybe create a thicker line right here that later on could be recolored with a different color. And also to create some kind of the, you know, like the checkerboard something thing right here, we can go toward the middle part and create some horizontal lines here too. So again, we will need to go not with straight lines, we will go with some kind of the curves right here. For example, let's go like that and let's go and create a couple of lines going in that way. We will need to finish up with our scarf that we have right here. So let's go toward this part and let's create some lines here too. So again, we are following the direction that we have for our scarf, so not creating the straight lines, going with curves and creating our pattern onto these parts too. And also right here where we are creating these little like vertical lines right now, we can emphasize to the shape that we have for our scarf, so it's kind of rounded. So we can go with this line that we have right here on a vertical axis and make them rounded too. When we have it, we will need to add a bit of the line right here too to finish up with our pattern. And when we have the result like that, if you see that you can go and maybe adjust some parts, so for example something doesn't look too good, like I see that right here we will need to add a bit more like part of the scarf right here, I will go and do that too. And again, doesn't need to be perfect right now. We can fix everything later on when we are done with our sketch. So when we have the result like that, let's probably finish up with the bottom part, and we will create the coat right here. So for the coat or for the sweater, let's go towards the scarf on the bottom of the scarf, and we will step a bit from the side. So when we are stepped from the side, we will go down and create the curve going in that way. We're creating simple looking elements right here, simple looking like sweater or something, nothing too fancy. When we have it, we will need to do the same onto the opposite side. So we will need to try to position the line on the opposite sides on the same like level here and the same distance from the center. So let's go and create the line right here. We will need to see only the bottom part of it. When we have it, we will connect everything on the bottom with the curve. You can go with one line, you can hold it at the end. You can go to the editing tool if you want to adjust the curvature or something. Adjust it if you need to erase the lines that you don't need. And let's finish up with everything that we have on the bottom by creating a little arm right here. I'll probably go and make this line a little bit higher than it is right now. So something like that, not going beyond the frames that we have created for our illustration. So not going beyond this line that we have on the bottom. When we have this, let's get back to our brush and let's go toward this area right here, toward the left, where right now is the blank area. We want to balance everything out, and we will add the arm right here so it doesn't look too like blank right here. What we are going to be doing, we will be stepping a bit from this line that we have onto the side, and we will go and create another line that will go up in that way. So we can make it quite parallel to what we have onto the outside part, or we can maybe shift it a little bit and create something going in that way. When we have it, we will go towards the line that we have as our line of symmetry. We will go closer to it and we will create the line that will go in that way. We want it to be a little bit tilted, so we are creating the line onto the right a little bit smaller in size than we have onto the left. And when we have it, let's go toward the top and we will create, again, the tilted line that will go in that way. When we have it, we want to go and erase the parts that we don't need, so we are creating a very nicely looking illustration. When we have it, again, you can see the line is tilted like that. We will go toward the top and we will create the toppy part that we have right here onto our sleeves. So let's go a little bit closer to the center from the sides and we will create the smaller version of what we already created. So going like that and creating the line going in that way. Closing it up onto the top, going to the area where we have our scarf, erasing the parts that are overlapping, so going with our eraser in that way. When we have it, let's also go towards the top right here, and we will create some kind of the like fingers right here, but very, very tips of the fingers. So we will go and create a couple of lines, 3 like that, and we will create our arm. If you want to go and try it out one more time, maybe with the bigger elements, smaller elements, maybe position them differently, you are welcome to go and do that. So we will need to have just a glimpse of the hand right here, and when we have it, we will go toward the sleeve part that we have on the top, and let's add some texture here in the shape of the lines like that. Now when we have it, we have the bottom part done, so let's go and deal with the boldness. Let's begin working onto our hair by creating some little guiding points. So firstly, we will go towards these little lines we have on the top. We will go slightly lower from it and create a little mark down like that. And when we have this mark down done, let's go towards the part right here where we have like the bold part and our line of symmetry. And we will go from it, from the center toward the right, and we will make a little mark down here too. Now, when we have these mark downs done, let's go toward one of the sides, for example, to the left, and we will start by creating a little shape for our fringe or the top part, the front part of our hair. So what we're going to be doing, we will be going toward this line that we have for the top part of our eyes, and we will go a little bit higher than it is and creating another mark down right here. So now when we have all of these mark downs, we will go and create the line that will go in that way. So we are some kind of hiding our little eyebrow right here. We are creating a very soft curve. We are going in that way. If you don't want to see this eyebrow, you are welcome to go and erase it. When we have it, we will get back to our brush and we will go toward this little part that we've created right here, and we will create some kind of the volume part, so this part of this element. So we will go and create the rounder shape, and we will create some kind of the like hook or something like that, a little little part like that. When we have it, we will go toward the opposite side and create something similar here, but in a smaller way. So going firstly and creating this little triangle, very soft triangular shape, creating something going like that. And when we have it, we will go toward the outside part and we will start to create the part of the hair here too. So for this part, let's go toward this little part and we will go and create something going in that way. We want to go toward the bottom part and we want to go and kind of see what we have right here for our ear. You can go a little bit higher, a little bit lower. You can go and maybe create some kind of the layering system right here with these lines that you're creating. Again, for now, mapping out doesn't need to be super perfect. When we have this line right here, we will need to pay attention to what we have right here for our scarf. We want it to be interesting. We want to add these strands of hair, some kind of looking towards the part that we have for our scarf, towards the middle part of the scarf. So we want it to be like inside a little bit, and we want to connect it nicely with the strands of hair that we have on the top and the parts that we have right here for the scarf. So let's go right here and we will kind of create the loop going in that way. Again, if you need to clean it up with your eraser, go and clean it up. Doesn't need to be perfect. When we have it, we will go toward our brush firstly and we will start to do the same things onto the opposite side too. So firstly, we will go towards the area right here where we have the ear and where we have the scarf onto the left side. And we will start by creating a little loop of hair here too. So let's go and start to do it in that way. We'll go closer to the shape where we have the cheek, the ear, and the scarf, and we will start to do the thing like that. So we are going from the inside part of our scarf and starting to create a loop going in that way. So creating a hook like that, and then going outside and creating the line going in that way. When we have it, we will go towards the top and we will start to create this strand of the hair that we will connect with this little hook that we've created onto the bottom. Maybe for now it doesn't look too good, we can fix it, don't worry. We will go toward this intersection that we have right here onto the top and we will go a little bit higher from it. So we can actually go and create a line going like that. So we'll be able to later on create other details on the top and connect it with this shape. When we have it, we will go a little bit higher than this loop that we have right here. And we will start by creating a little rounder shape going in that way. So when we have this rounder shape, we will need to go down and we will need to create something similar to what we have right here onto this side. Let's go toward this element and we will go down and start to create a line going in that way. So we are creating a very nicely looking curve, a little bit stiff right here onto the middle part. If you don't like the lines that you have right here that you had for the boldness part, we will go and erase them with our eraser like that on both sides if you prefer. So go on like that and erasing the parts that we don't need. Now when we have it, let's go closer to the shape that we have for our eyes with this curve that we have right here. So going like that, erasing the parts that we don't need. So again, trying to create everything in a neat way so we are not confused later on when we are going to be creating the clean lines. When we have the result like that, we also don't need this little part that we have right here for our scarf. So let's go and get rid of it. And let's work onto this little part that we have right here. So firstly, we will go a little bit higher with the shape that we have right here. So the shape that we have for this loop, we will start to create the strand of hair. So going like that, creating it in that way. And then we will need to somehow connect it nicely with the top part and create it in a nice way that we have it right here onto the bottom. So what we can do, we will go with this strand of hair and we will need to connect it with half of this element that we have onto the bottom. So we are creating something going in that way. When we have it, we will go towards the middle part of this loop and we will go toward the outside part like that. So we are connecting this hook with this thing that we have right here in the middle. Again, if you see that you have some lines that you need to get rid of, so you see clearly what you are doing, we will go and do it with our eraser. Now, when we have this hair right here, we will continue by adding a couple of more details over the top. So we will finish up working on our hair. You can decide whether we want to go from the top or from the bottom. So probably we will go from the top to define the top part of our hair. So let's go from this little markdown that we've created right here, but we will again go toward this little part right here onto the middle part to this line that we have right here. And from this line, we will start to create a rounder shape going up in that way. Little bit lower than this little markdown that we've created. So let's go and create it going in that way. When we have this top part, I will also erase this little part that we have onto the opposite side because we don't need it. We will go from this part and we will go down and start to create other elements here. So let's firstly go a little bit outside the shape so we don't have a weirdly looking small hat over the top. So we will elongate this line and we will go towards this line that we have right here. And we will start to create a little part going outside, so we are adding some interest toward our hair, and we will need to connect everything super nicely, super smoothly, so going like that and trying to achieve this look. When we have it, we will go down and we will start to create other elements here too. So firstly, let's go toward this loop that we've created. We will go slightly higher from it toward this side, and we will start to create another hair right here, another strand of hair going up in that way. So let's go and maybe make it a little bit less wide. So going with our eraser and working onto the overall shape. Now when we have it, we will go toward this area that we have right here between these two strands, and we will go from it and create another strand of hair right here. So going firstly to the bottom and starting to create a very softly looking curve. We will need to try to put more volume toward the bottom part, so we are creating some kind of the very rounded shape over the bottom. And when we have this curve, we will go toward the top and we will need to connect it with this little tip that we have right here. So let's go like that and start to create this line. Again, we can go and maybe elongate this little part. We can work onto the lines right here so everything looks balanced, everything looks nice. So we will need to work onto this little part too. And also, let's go and create another little part that will go outside, and we will put it right here onto this little line. So let's go outside and let's create the shape that will go outside. We will need to go toward the top right here. We'll go slightly higher, so between these two lines that we already have, again starting to create a very rounded shape over the top and going down with it, going outside the shape and creating another little hook or a little loop going outside. Going like that, starting to create a very nicely looking detail, and we will need to connect it with this little strand of hair that we already have onto our screen. Let's erase everything that we don't need. Let's see what we've created. Let's decide whether we need to go and adjust some parts. For example, we can go and work onto this little part and make it a little bit less boring by creating a little bit of the free space right here that we will not recolor later on. So we will go toward this little part and we will start by creating a line going down in that way. When we have it, we will go toward the bottom part and we will create a line that will go toward the inside part, but we will have this little part right here that later on we won't recolor, so we will have a bit of the free space right here. If you want, you can make it a little bit smaller by adding a bit of volume towards the strand of hair that you have right here, like the second one. You can spend some time here, take a look at it from the distance to decide whether you like how it looks or whether you want to go and maybe adjust it a little bit. Spend some time here and adjust the shape to your liking. We also can go toward the top and maybe make this little part a little bit bigger, so it's not that, again, small onto the top. So we can go and try it out a couple of times, maybe see it from the distance, decide whether we like it or not. Again, we can fix it later on if we want to. When we have the result like that, let's go toward the bottom part with this little shape right here. So we will need to create a rounder shape going in that way. And we will go toward the opposite side and start to work onto the opposite side too. So let's go a little bit lower with the shape right here onto this side. So creating the similar shape to what we have on the top, but a little bit lower than we have it onto the opposite side. And when we have this little dip right here, let's create the free part right here that will go in that way. So some kind of the crescent shape right here. Let's go and create something going like that. Again, you can go bigger with the shape, smaller with the shape. When you have it, let's go toward the opposite side and start to work onto the hair here too. So firstly, let's go from the top and we will continue creating the hat. Let's maybe make it a little bit, again, less small right here. When we have it, we will go down and continue creating the shape going toward like the bottom part. So let's work onto the bottom part like that. We will go toward this chin line right here. We will start to create the rounder shape, something similar to what we have onto the opposite side, a little bit smaller onto this side, going toward the middle part and starting to connect it with what we have onto the bottom. Again, try to add more volume toward the bottom part so it looks rounded, it looks nice. If you see that, you can go and manually work on some areas and make them not that like stiff and add a bit more of the dynamic right here. You are welcome to go and do that. When we have the main shape like that, let's go and add a couple of strands of hair here too. For example, we can go to this little part and maybe make it a little bit rounder here. So going with our brush, with our eraser, creating a very softly looking curve going down. And then we can go toward this area right here and create a couple of strands here too. But before doing it, let's probably lift this up a little bit. So we'll go like half of the area right here up and we will create a softer curve right here. So everything will look neat and nice and smooth. So for example, going in that way, erasing this part right here, going toward these parts, trying to soften it up, and probably we can do the same onto the opposite side too. So for example, we can go toward this part and cut it a little bit in that way, maybe make it a little bit like lower right here onto this element. So I'll try to do it one more time so everything looks a little bit like neater and a little bit smaller in shape. So for example, let's try to do it in that way. We will go and create a smaller shape right here, and then we will go toward this part and we will again create this little part right here. So something similar to what we had before, but a little bit smaller in size. When we have it, going toward this little part, again creating this curve right here, going toward the thinner element, and then going toward the bottom and creating the part right here that will look in that way. So now when everything looks a little bit neater, we can also go toward this part and maybe soften it up a little bit and create it in a different way. Again, it doesn't need to be perfect. We can try to fix it later on, but if we see that we can go and create something differently, we can go and do it straight away. So when we have the result like that, let's for now go toward this little part and we will create a couple of strands here. So for example, let's go toward the top. We will add a bit of the volume right here on the top and we will create a strand of hair that will go a little bit like outside. So going toward the bottom and starting to create the element going in that way. Again, we can do it very in a messy way, so creating something going like that. When we like the overall shape, we can add some thickness to it, maybe go a little bit lower with our shape and create more thickness and doing it in that way. So again, clean it up with your eraser, create a couple of strands of hair right here so it doesn't look too blank right here. When we have the result like that, we also can go toward this part and we can add like a free strand right here. So for this free strand, let's go toward the middle part right here and we will start from it going up, creating a bit of the strand of hair going outside, and we will need to connect it with the overall shape that we have right here for our mass of hair onto the top. So let's create something going in that way. Again, we will need to make sure that we are some kind of putting it inside the shape of the scarf. So we are kind of ending everything that we have right here for the hair closer to the shape that we have for the scarf. So when we have it, let's go and add a bit of the cut right here inside. So what we are going to be doing is going toward this little part and we will erase the part right here. And then we will go toward this part and we will add like the very softly looking element like that. Again, we can go with the bigger size of this cut or with the smaller size of the cut. Again, we can fix everything later on. We can see what we did with the more clean eye right here by erasing the parts that we don't need with our eraser, for example. So let's work onto the lines right here a little bit and make them in a clean way. When we have the result like that, let's work a little bit onto the bottom part. So again, if you see that you can go and maybe make some elements smaller or bigger or adjust them in any way, let's go and do that. So for example, we can go and maybe soften up the bottom part of the scarf and make it a little bit more balanced by creating like the receding part right here. So the part on the top is a little bit bigger, the part on the bottom a little bit smaller. You can go like that and create it. And for example, we can go right here and maybe make this sweater a little bit bigger and work onto both sides with these elements too. So for example, going like here, adding a bit of the volume toward the bottom part. So if you see that you can go and adjust some parts, go and adjust them. And also we can go and maybe make the arm a little bit bigger too, the overall shape, maybe make it like here a little bit bigger too. So you can spend some time here and adjust the parts that you want to adjust with what you have, like the manual things that you have, brush and your eraser. And when we have the result like that, let's also add a bit of the hair going outside the shape. So we will go more toward the bottom and we will add a couple of strands of hair here too. So let's firstly define where we want to end our hair. And we again want to create some kind of the balanced look. We want to create the volume here and we want to create some balance right here, right? So we will firstly go toward the bottom part and we will start to create the lines going in that way. So you can either elongate the line that you have on the bottom or go a little bit higher than it is. And when we have it, we will start to add the strands of hair from the outside part. Inside part, going toward the shape that we have right here for our coat or the sweater, and we are starting to create the strand of hair going up in that way. Again, we will need to try to connect our hair right here in the area where we have our scarf, so everything looks like balanced and we have some kind of like this shape. When we have it, the first strand, we will go closer toward the outside part and we will again create another strand of hair here too. Again, trying to add more volume toward the bottom part, so creating something going in that way. When we have it, we can go and start to create the strands of hair that are going some kind of outside the shape too, to add some movement here. Let's go again toward this little part firstly, and we will start by creating the little strand going outside the shape like that. So let's create some kind of the hook right here, creating some thickness to it, and then we will create one more free strand right here by creating something going in that way. Again, add some movement, make it thicker, make it thinner. It's up to you. When you have it on one side, let's go to the opposite side and create something similar here too. So again, starting from the bottom and from the inside part, starting to add the strands of hair here. You can overlap the scarf if it's easier for you. When you have the first one, let's create another one right here. So creating something like that. And then let's create one strand of hair that will be some kind of free right here. So going like that, again, trying to create very rounder shapes, very like free elements right here, starting to create the elements like that and trying to make them as a part of the big picture right here too. Now one more time, let's grab our brush and our eraser, and if you see that there are some parts that you want to go manually to and adjust them, let's go and do that. So for example, go to some of the elements, define them more, add more details to them, clean them up, do something like that. Go manually and adjust the parts that you want to adjust. So for example, we can maybe go right here and maybe lift up the overall shape that we have for the bottom part of our little scarf right here, or decide on your own what you want to fix. You can go and do that. We can go, for example, right here and create a softer curve or like more defined curve if you want to. We also can go and deal with this part right here, not probably going too like inside the shape of the scarf, maybe closer to the shape, but not too far beyond inside. When we have the result like that, we also can add some attributes onto the hair. So for example, we can go to this part where we have pretty blank elements. We don't have much elements here, so we will need to balance it out. Let's go and create a little leaf right here. So for example, let's go and start by creating the line going in that way. So you can go with a bit of the curve and then go toward the sides and create two more lines going outside like that. Let's go and create the leaf going in that way. Of course, if you want to experiment, you are welcome to create another shape for the leaf. If you want to create another detail right here onto the top, you are welcome to create something else if you prefer. Let's go and create some beautifications right here and create it in a nice way. Add some thickness to the stem too. If you are creating a leaf, try to create it in a nice way and even way. So if you need to see clearly what you are doing, use your brush, use your eraser, erase the parts that you don't need. So for example, we probably will need to go right here and make it slightly smaller, and we will connect it nicely onto the bottom too. So spend some time here, create a nice little looking element. Take a look at it from the distance to decide whether you want to adjust it or do something else with it. Adjust it to your liking, try to make a cleanly looking element. If you already did, or if you want to change the placement of it, for example, when you already have it onto your screen, you can go again to the S ribbon icon, freehand method, select this element, go around so only this element is selected, and make a different placement for it by using the arrow key on the top left. So using uniform method, moving it up. If you want to rotate it, go to the green note right here, make a rotational movement, make it smaller by dragging one of the corners to the inside part. Find the placement for it. When you are satisfied with the placement and rotation and everything, for example, something like that, let's tap onto the first icon that we used. It was our S ribbon icon. And if we need to restore some of the elements, we will go and use our brush to restore our elements. And now when we have the result like that, let's take a look at everything and decide whether we want to adjust something else. So for example, we can go and maybe sculpt our shapes a little bit in a different way. We can do it very easily by going to the Magic Wand tool, going under Liquify and using the option push right here. We have this slider with the size of the brush that we're going to be pushing with, so you can go and adjust it. You can go back and forth and adjust the size to your liking, and we can go to some areas that we have right here for our everything that we have onto our canvas, and we can go and sculpt them to create something different. So if you want to adjust some parts, if you want to maybe resize or reposition something, or sculpt, as I mentioned before, you are welcome to go and do what you want to do with the elements that you have created. So for now, let's spend some time here and adjust our illustration so we like how it looks. So I decided to make the bottom part a little bit wider, so we will have less free space outside and everything. And also I lift this scarf a little bit so we again have less space right here that is kind of free. And also I made a little bit of a mess right here with the little leaf, but we can fix it later on when we are out of this mode. So if you are satisfied with everything here, and if you don't want to adjust anything else for now with this tool, let's tap onto our Magic Wand tool twice to get away from this mode, and we can get back to our brush and maybe manually go and adjust some parts, so again we are not confused later on. So use your brush, use your eraser. If you have some elements that you want to adjust, go and adjust them. So for example, I will go and work more onto this leaf so it's not looking that creepy. So go in like that and starting to erase the parts, add the parts, work onto the parts, so clean up everything so your sketch looks decent. And when we have the result that we quite like, that we can understand what we need to recreate and we don't need to recreate later on, when you know what you need to do, when we are satisfied with everything here, let's move on to the clean lines part. Let's start working onto our lines, firstly by going and changing the brush. So we will go to our brush library, we'll go to the inking folder and we will select technical pen brush. We want all of our lines to be pretty smooth, so let's tap onto our brush, go inside the brush studio, and on the left we'll go under stabilization. We will be playing with amount of streamline and amount of stabilization. So you can set the settings the same way as you see them right now onto your screen. Of course, you can go to the drawing pad, try it out right here, decide whether you want to adjust it even more. If you want to do that, go and do what you need to do. And when you are done, let's hit our little done button over the top right. Now, when we are prepared with our brush, let's continue by preparing what we have for our sketch right now. So we'll go to our layers and we will go to the N icon on our layer with this sketch and we will adjust the opacity. So go in and finding the level that works for us. And when we found it, let's tap onto our layer and create one more layer on top. If you want, you can keep these two layers where you have the grid system on, or you can go and hide them if you want. When we are done with preparing our layers, let's go and make sure that we are using the right color for our lines. So let's go and, for example, select our dark brown lines color. When we did it, let's go and start working onto our lines. So we'll go toward our slider with the size and we will set it to something around 17% or so. If you want to change it to something bigger or smaller, you are welcome to do it. When we are done, let's go and start working onto our illustration by recreating what we have for our eyes, for example. So again, we are doing the same thing as we did it onto our sketch. We will go and recreate only one of the eyes right here. So let's first go and start by recreating what we have right here for our iris. And when we are creating the clean lines, our main goal is to create the lines that will be closed. So we will need to make sure that we don't have any gaps into our lines, and we don't actually need to recreate everything with 100% of similarity to what we have onto our sketch. So if you want to adjust some parts, you are welcome to do it. You can use all the options that we used before. Hold your line at the ends, go to the editing tool over the top, adjust it to your liking, reposition it, resize it, maybe find a different rotation for these elements. You are welcome to experiment a little bit right here. And when we have the shape that we like, if you want to, of course, go and adjust it. When we found the shape that we like, let's tap on the screen. And as we are working with the brush that has some kind of the pressure brush right here, we will need to make sure that the connections that we are creating on the top and everywhere where we have the connections, that they are quite seamless. So that means that if we have some kind of a gap like that, we will go over this little part. We are paying attention more toward the outside part of our line right now, because we will add the color inside. But when we are going to be creating other lines, we will need to pay attention to all the sides of the lines that we have. So we will need to make sure that the lines are quite seamless right here and looking smooth. So when we have the result like that, let's straight away go to our icon with the color and we will drag it toward the middle part. Now when we have the result like that, let's again get back to our brush and we will recreate the shape that we have for our eyelashes. So again, let's go with our brush. Let's start to recreate our shape. Again, using all of the tools that we used before. If you hold your line and if you see that you have some kind of the element like that, you are welcome to grab your eraser and erase it straight away. We don't need to recreate the lines with just one line. We can go and create them like partially. And again, we can use all the options that we used before. So hold your line, go to the editing tool, adjust the curvature if you need to. Make sure that everything looks nice and that everything is connected nicely too and doesn't have any gaps or dents or anything like that where you have the connections. When we have the bottom part done, let's go to the top part of this element and let's recreate it too. Again, you don't need to recreate it in 100% of similarity to what you have onto your sketch. Make sure that you are creating the connections that look nice, of course. Make sure that you are creating the connections that are not having any gaps in it. You can overlap the lines in that way and go along the whole shape and recreate it completely in a very smooth way. Again, make sure that the connection right here onto the inner corner of our eyelashes is looking nice. And when we have the basic shape, let's drag and drop the color inside. And let's make sure by going to the corners that we don't have any gaps into our coloring right here. So if you zoom in, you will probably see that you have some not colored elements, so you can go manually and add the color to these parts. Also, let's pay attention toward the corners that we have right here onto our eyelashes. So we will be paying attention to these elements and this one. We want them to be pretty cornery and pretty pointy. So if you want, you can go with your brush and with your eraser and try to achieve it. So either add a bit of the pointy element right here or erase the elements that you already have onto your screen to create some pointy element like that. When we have it, let's get back to our brush and let's recreate this little lead line over the top. So again, either with one line or with a couple of lines, let's create it. And as I mentioned before, we are using the brush that has some pressure, so we can play with it too. You can start by creating the lines that will be not very push not too much onto your line, and you will create a thinner line and then maybe put a little bit more pressure toward the middle part and you will have a thicker line right here. So you can spend some time here and play with this tool or use your brush, use your eraser to achieve this look. Now when we have the first eye done, let's go and make a copy of it and let's put it over the opposite side too. So we can do it very easily by going to our layers and we will see that we have this layer with one of the eyes that we have. We can swipe it from right to left and use the option duplicate. Now, when we have the second copy, we can go to our arrow key on the top left, uniform method, snapping is on, firstly using the option flip horizontal, and then we will move the shape toward the opposite side. We can follow the lines of the guidance that we have right here, so we are moving along this line that we have in the center, and when we found the placement for this eye, let's lift up what we have right here, what we are holding right now. So when we have the result like that, make sure that the eyes are looking nice and that they are looking positioned in the middle. And when we have the result that we like, let's tap onto our arrow key, make sure that everything looks nice by looking at it from the distance. When it is, go into our layers and we will need to merge these two layers together. So go on the layer on the top, tapping using the option merge down. Now when we have two eyes on one layer, let's go and continue recreating the details that we have onto our sketch. So firstly, let's go toward the mouth and let's recreate it. Again, we can play a bit with our pressure that we will put onto our brush, and we can add a bit more pressure toward the corners and release the pressure that we will have right here into the middle. So let's try to do that. We can go and again create the line in the partial way and create something good in that way. If it doesn't look too good, we are welcome to go and grab our brush and eraser and adjust the parts that we don't need. So what we want to achieve right here is a bit more thickness over the corners and a bit like less thickness over the middle part. If you already created the line and if you don't quite like it, if it's not like looking right, you can always get back to your Magic Wand tool, Liquify tool, push option and adjust the line slightly. So probably firstly grab the smaller size of the brush and then use it to create the element that you like to see right here. Also, while we are still here at our Liquify tool, we can play a bit with our eyes by making them a different shape. So let's go to the size slider and we will make it slightly bigger. And first we'll go toward the corner that we have right here, the inner corner of our eye, and we will drag it a little bit toward the bottom part. So we are some kind of elongating the shape and we are making some kind of the egg shape. When we have it on one side, let's do the same onto the opposite side. So again, going from the middle and creating a similar shape to what we've created onto the opposite side. Now, when we have the result like that, decide whether you like it or not, or whether you want to go and adjust it in any way. When you are satisfied with everything, let's tap onto our Magic Wand tool twice to get away from this mode. Now, when we have the result like that, let's get back to our brush and continue working onto our lines. So, for example, let's continue by going toward the lines that we have right here for our cheeks, and let's recreate that. So we are stepping a bit from the lines that we have for our eyes, and we are creating the line that will go down in that way. When we have it on one side, let's go toward the opposite side and recreate something similar here too. If you don't like how the line looks, you are welcome to try it out one more time, maybe go a little bit more inwards, create it in that way, try to repeat the same thing onto the opposite side too. If you are overlapping the lines that you have right here for the eyelashes, you are welcome to keep it, or you can go a little bit farther away from them and try to create the shapes that we have for our cheeks a little bit beyond the frames that we have right here onto our sketch. So decide on your own whether you want to maybe try out something different right here. And when you are satisfied with it, let's go and continue creating other details. So for example, let's go and recreate this line that we have for our eyelash. It's not eyelash, eyebrow. Let's go and recreate it. So we will go and create some kind of the drop shape like that. You can add a bit of thickness more toward the inner corner and create a bit of the tip element right here onto the side. Straight away we can go with our brush and add the color inside, and if you want to work onto the shape, you are welcome to grab your eraser and adjust it to your liking. For example, let's maybe create it in a more like a drop shape like that, and when we have it, decide whether you want to put another shape for the eyebrow onto the opposite side, whether it will be seen or not when you are going to be recreating the fringe right here. If it's seen, go and recreate the same detail over the opposite side. So for example, let's try it out right here. Let's create it. Let's go to our eraser and adjust the part that we don't need. So going like that with our brush and trying to remain the same shape that we've created onto the opposite side. Now, when we have the result like that, we also will need to pay attention to the position of these elements. And if you already created it and if you want to adjust it, we can go straight away to our S ribbon icon, use freehand method and go to this element that we want to adjust, select it like that, and then go to our arrow key and play around with this tool. So for example, we can go and make this eyebrow a little bit bigger. So it will be quite similar to what we have onto the opposite side. And we can move it a little bit higher so it will be on the same level. If you want to rotate it, go to the green node, hold it, and make a rotational movement. So find the placement for this element, and when we are done, let's tap onto the first icon that we were using, and it was our S ribbon icon. When we have the result like that, I will try out it one more time. When we have it in that way, let's continue by recreating some other details. So for example, let's get back to these two elements that we have for the cheeks, and we will put the little ears right here. So we will go to the bottom and we will create the details going up in that way. You can again hold your line and the end, go to the opposite side, create something similar here. So try to position it on the same level. So we have our lines of guidance. If you didn't turn them off, we can go and use them to create the details on the same level that we have created onto the opposite side. So for example, let's go and create something going in that way, and let's continue by recreating some other details. For example, let's go toward our hair and let's start recreating it too. So let's go and start from here. We will be going along the whole shape that we have, and we will be recreating our lines quite similar to what we have onto our sketch. Again, we are working with our brush and with our eraser to create the smooth lines right here, and we are working partially to create these elements. So let's firstly go toward this little part and let's recreate it here. We'll go toward the top and we will try to create it in a smooth way, going toward the middle part right here and creating a very nicely looking curve from this middle part. When we have it going toward this little part that we have right here, decide whether you want to overlap the shape that you've created for the eyebrow or go higher or lower. And let's go and recreate this detail. Again, trying to create everything in a very smooth way. If you want to experiment a little bit, you are welcome to create the lines in a way that you want. So for example, let's go with something going in that way, and we will go toward this little part and we will recreate it here too. So we will need to go to this loop that we've created and nicely connect it with the shape that we have on the top, so we don't have a weird connection right here. And also we'll need to pay attention to this part and create it in a way that it is the part of the hair and it's not like looking too weird, too straight and something going in that way. So when we have the result like that, we'll fix this little part and connect it with the detail that we have on the bottom. And again, working with our brush and with our eraser to adjust the lines so they look smooth. When we have the result like that, let's go toward this little part and we will again connect it with the shape that we have on the bottom. So we can go a little bit lower and create the line that will go in that way. We cannot quite connect it with the shape that we have on the bottom because probably it won't grow from one place. So we can go a little bit higher, but we will need to create this kind of connection right here onto the top. And when we're creating the whole mass of hair right here, as I mentioned before, we'll need to have the lines that are closed, but we will need to pay more attention toward the outside parts. So whether we are going to be creating the hair right here, later on when we are going to be able to add the colors, we'll need to have the outlines that will be outside closed. So if you have the lines that you have inside, they can be not closed. So let's continue recreating the hair and we will go along the whole lines that we have onto our sketch and we will go and try to recreate them. Again, pay attention to the connections and to all the lines that you are creating. Try to make them in a very smooth way. When we have this curl done, we will go a little bit higher right here to finish up with this line. So we are creating some kinds of the detail right here, not a full line that will go up. When we have it, let's go toward the next element that we have right here and let's recreate it too. So again, using all the options that we used before to create smooth lines. Hold your line, go to the editing tool and adjust them from here. And again, you don't need to recreate everything the same way as you have it on the sketch. So you can spend some time here and maybe find different directions for your lines or different size or something else that you prefer right here. Maybe even different details that you have onto the sketch. So you can play around and create details in a way that you prefer. For example, I will go a little bit more inwards with the shape and play a little bit with this little outside curl right here onto the side. And again, as we are using a bit of pressure to our brush, we can play with it too. So you can go and maybe release the pressure over the corners right here and create a thinner looking element right here if you prefer. And again, to create the finished look, we can go towards the corners and we can work onto them and create these very spiky elements like that. And also pay attention to the connections like right here. So we will go and again try to make them very, very pointy. Now let's continue by going toward the top and we will finish up with this line. So again, going toward this little part and we will again create something similar to what we have right here. So we'll have a bit of the volume right here. Let's continue creating this line and we will go more inwards with it right here in the middle. And again, try to work onto the thickness of the lines and their evenness. So if you see that you overdid somewhere, go with your brush and with your eraser to create a very smooth and believable line right here. So when we are done with this part, let's go and finish up with the top part that we have onto the left, and we will start from the bottom right here and recreate this detail that we have for our last little curl over the left. So let's, for example, go from this little part, maybe go a little bit lower than this line that we have right here. Again, we can try out a couple of times. If we don't like something, we can try it out one more time and create it in a different way. You can always take a look at what you are creating from the distance to see whether you like what you are creating or not. So for example, it's seen better that you will need to go and probably add more volume right here onto the bottom from the distance than we have seen it from the very close look. So spend some time here when you are at the distance right here and adjust these lines if you want to. When we have the line that we have, we need to pay attention to the connections right here. So if we see that we have some gaps, we will go and we will close them like that. And then we will continue creating what we had onto our sketch. So this kind of the wrapping effect onto our little curl. So let's go from the top right here and we will create the element going down in that way. And also we had a little bit of the cut right here that later on we won't be recoloring, so we will go and try to create it here too. Now when we have it, let's go over the top and we will need to pay attention to this little line that we have right here on the top to connect it nicely with this element over the top part. So if we go and create the line like that, it won't be normal, it won't be okay. We will need to try to position this line on the same level that we have on our previous line. So you can go and mentally try to create the line that will go in that way, make a little mark down, for example, and then continue creating the line going up. Again, take a look at it from the distance to see whether you did it right or whether you need to go and try it out one more time. You can probably go and create a full line right here, and you can erase the part that you don't need later on if you need to, but you can try it out a couple of times without creating this line and create this line on the top too. Probably I will go one more time and create it in a less flat way, so going in that way and trying to create something like that. When we have it, going over the top and recreating this little detail here too. Again, straight away working on our connections right here, trying to create a nicely looking element, a bit of the tip here, and again going outside and doing the same thing here too. And let's finish up creating this shape by recreating this detail over the top. So creating a very rounded element. Again, if we want, we can hold it at the end, and we will go towards this little part that we've created as our free strand right here. We will firstly go and create the line going in that way. So we will create something similar to what we have right here in the middle. If we see that we need to go to some lines that we have right here and adjust them with our brush and with our eraser, create the tips or work onto the overall look of the lines, we will go and do that straight away. And when we have the result like that, let's continue by recreating this detail that we have over the opposite side. So we will need to connect it nicely with this line that we have on the top. So let's go and try to do that. So we will go from this little line and create a bit of the dent. And we will start by going toward this little dent that we've created and going toward the opposite side and creating this line right here. So you can decide whether you want to go with a line like that and create it only partially where you have the overlapping part of the leaf, or whether you want to go full size right here and create the leaf maybe on a separate layer, so it will be easier to adjust it. So you can decide it on your own. And when we have this little dent, let's finish up by creating this little peculiar detail over the top. So for example, let's go from this dent that we've created and create the line going like that. You can again experiment a little bit and create something different from what you have onto your sketch. Play around, create something that will look very, very interesting. Again, work onto the smoothness of the lines and their evenness. So if you see that you somewhere made the line a little bit too thick, work with your eraser and try to make it even with all the lines that you already have onto your screen. So we'll go right here and try to create a smoother connection onto these parts so we don't have like the very angular things. When we have this little part, let's go toward this little element that we have on the opposite side and start to create it here too. So probably let's go in that way, and then we will create the bottom part that will look like that. We'll need to pay attention to this element because it's the top part of our hat and we don't need it to be very weird. So if you need to try it out one more time, try to do it in a seamless line right here. When you have it, let's go toward the bottom part and let's recreate this side here too. We also can go toward this little part. We don't have anything onto our sketch, but we can create some kind of the volume here too, but we won't be going with the full lines as we have them onto our left. We will go and connect the parts right here by creating the little details going outside onto the opposite side. So let's go and create a couple of details going in that way. Very small lines, but we will show that there is some volume with these lines onto our lines. When we have it like 2 lines of these elements, we will go and create one more of these elements over the opposite side and connect it with what we have onto our opposite side again. When we have it, let's continue by going toward other elements and let's recreate them too. Where we have the ear, we can create a couple of more strands of hair, for example, inside and cover up this little part, or we can continue creating the ear and deal with it in that way. So you can decide whether you want to add more strands of hair right here or just elongate the shape that you have for the ear. If you are adding strands of hair, make sure that you are creating them in a very smooth way, and if you are creating these strands, make sure that you are connecting them nicely so you don't have very angular elements right here. Pay attention to these parts and create them in that way so everything is cute and nice and smooth. And by using all of these tools as we mentioned before and using the same technique, let's finish up this hair that we have onto the right parts. And again, if you need to fix something minor, you can go to the Liquify tool and maybe adjust it in that way. When we are done with the fixing right here onto this part, let's get back again to our canvas and let's go and start recreating the shape that we have for our scarf. So nothing new here, going along the lines that we have right here and recreating them the same way as we have them onto the sketch, or similar way to what we have onto the sketch. So going again the same way and starting to recreate the lines. Where you have the hair, you will need to make sure that you understand what goes inside and what stays overlapped. You will need to create the lines in accordance with it. So if you see that you have some hair that is going inside the shape of the scarf, you are welcome to overlap it, or you are welcome to tuck it in and then erase the lines that you don't need. And again, for the inner part of the scarf, you can do the same thing as we did right here onto the hair. You can go with not a full line, but with the line that having a little bit of a tip right here. We don't need the lines inside to be closed if you don't want it, but we will need to make sure that the lines outside are closed. So continue adding the lines onto the scarf. And again, pay attention to these little elements that we've created right here and make them quite separate from one another. When we are done with the scarf, let's continue by recreating the details on the bottom. So for example, let's go and start with this sleeve that we have onto the side. You can hold your line at the end, and if it snaps to a straight line, you can go and try to go inside the editing tool right here, and you might have the option arc. If you don't have it, you will need to try it out one more time with a bit of the curvier shape for these little elements. So try to do it, hold it, go into the editing tool. If you again don't have it, try it out one more time. When you finally have it, let's go again to our editing tool and adjust it from here. Let's decide whether we like the position of it and the rotation of it and the curvature of it and everything of it. When we are satisfied with it, let's tap onto the screen and continue creating the details that we have created onto our sketch. And again, for the sleeve, for example, we don't need to create the lines that will go till the end. So for example, we can go like that and create the open elements right here onto the sides. When we are done with the sleeve, we also can go toward the inside part and very easily create these elements here too. So going along the shape, and again, we are trying not to create very straight lines right here. We're trying to follow the overall shape of it. So we are creating very softly looking curves. When we have it, we will go toward the bottom and we will recreate this line that we have on the bottom. So connect it with the shape that you've created for the sleeve. If you need to go to the editing tool and adjust it, first let's take a look at it from the distance to see whether you want to maybe move it higher or lower or do something else with it, maybe adjust the curvature, the overall curvature. When we have the element that we have right now, when we are satisfied with it, let's tap on the screen. And if you have some tips that you need to work on, go with your eraser and erase the parts that you don't need. We also want to go to the tip that we have created right here and maybe soften it up slightly so it's not that like pointy. We will go with our brush and with our eraser and create the corner that will look in that way. When we have it, we will do the same onto the opposite side. So for example, we don't quite have the line where we have the opposite side of our sleeve, so we will go and recreate it manually. So we will need to eyeball where it is ending. So for example, we will go closer to the shape that we have for our scarf and we will try to do something similar that we have right here onto this side. So going a little bit inside and then continuing to create the line going in that way. So again, hold your line and then try it out. If you have the curve into the editing tool, go and adjust it right here. If you don't have it, go and try it out one more time to have this arc option. When you are having this arc option, make sure that it doesn't look too weird, so you don't have the line right here onto the top. It should be very natural, so we have it more toward the inside part of the scarf and it is ending up right here on the bottom, again in a natural way. So try to create this line, hold it, go to the editing tool, adjust it, make sure that it looks nice, make sure that it doesn't have any gaps, and work onto the corner that we have onto the bottom. When we have it, let's continue creating this bottom part of our hair right here. So again, recreating the same things as we have them onto our sketch or adjusting them slightly. For example, let's go a little bit higher than our overall shape ends. So going a little bit higher and trying to recreate the shapes right here. Again, use all the tools that we used before, use holding of the line and the ends, go into the editing tool, creating the elements in that way. And again, when you have the overall mass of hair, work onto the connections, work onto the tips, make them tippy, work with your brush and work with your eraser. And when we are done with the first side, let's move on to the opposite side and create something similar here too. And when we have it, we also can get back to our brush and create a couple of strands of hair that will be created only with the line. So for example, we can go toward the sides right here, toward, for example, right here, and create a line going in that way. Try to create it in a nice way so it fits the overall look and not going too far from the whole mass of hair that you have right here. You can go to some other places and create the similar details right here too. So for example, let's create 3 of these strands of hair that will be quite nice. And we will create 2 on one side and maybe 1 onto the opposite side, or maybe 4 of them. And when we have the result like that, when we have our hair done, let's go and create this little leaf that we have on the top and also recreate the pattern that we have onto our scarf. We will be going to our layers and we will create one more layer on top, and onto this layer, let's firstly go and create the pattern. So again, we are doing the same thing right here. We are recreating our details and we are creating them the same way as we have them onto our sketch. If you want, you can go with a different size of the brush. So for example, we can go a little bit bigger with the size, for example, for this element that we have right here. So let's go and recreate it in a bigger way like that. And you can decide whether you want to create all the lines on one layer, or if you want to recolor them differently, it will be easier for us to create the lines that will be in one color on one layer and in a different color in a different layer. So for example, let's go with this big of the elements that we've created and create a couple of more lines that will be horizontal, and we will use, for example, the red color for them, and for the thinner elements, we will use, for example, the white color later on. So we will be creating these elements on separate layers. So for now, let's go with big elements like that and let's recreate them with these little elements. Also, as we are creating the elements on a separate layer, we can go and overlap the shapes, and very easily we can erase them with our eraser. So for example, let's go like that with these bigger elements, and let's create one more layer on top, and we will go with slightly smaller size of the brush, and we will recreate other elements that later on we will recolor with different color. When we are done with the pattern, let's get back to our list and we will create one more layer on top. We also will go toward these two layers that we've created for our pattern right here. We will select one of them and we'll go to the second layer and we will swap it from left to right to selected two, and we will hold these layers and we will drag them underneath our main layer with the lines. When we have them in that way, let's get back to this new layer that we've created and let's go and recreate the leaf that we have right here. For the leaf, we can go, for example, to some place where we know that we have the center. So for example, to the center line right here, and we can go and recreate this leaf right here. If it's easier, you can get back to your list and hide the layer with the sketch that you have right here, for example, or the overall lines that you have right here to create the lines for the leaf easily. So we can go and recreate it right here. So for example, we can go and recreate the lines that we have right here that we have onto our sketch, and then we can move it to this line that we have as our line of symmetry and fix it right here. So when we've created the outlines, we can get back to our arrow key on the top left. We can go and move this thing to the center right here, rotate it, try to position it at the center, and then go manually and adjust the parts that are not looking too good. So for example, I will go and adjust this little part so it seems similar to what we have onto the opposite part right here. Again, work onto the lines, work onto the corners and all the connections that we have right here. Try to make them nice and smooth and everything. So going toward all of these little connections that we've created and trying to make them quite pointy. Now, when we have this leaf in that way, let's get back to our brush and let's go inside the shape and create these veins that we have for our leaf. So for example, let's go from the top and let's start to create the elements going in that way. If you need to work on the corners or the tips that we have right here, let's go with our eraser and adjust the parts that we need to adjust. And when we have everything done, when we like how the leaf looks, let's again get back to our arrow key. Let's move this shape towards its place, rotate it, find the placement for it. If you see that you lost a bit of crispness of your lines, we can go and adjust it very slightly. So firstly, find the placement for this element. When you are satisfied with it, let's tap onto our arrow key. And then if you zoom in, you will probably see that it is looking a little bit not that sharp that it was before. So we can go back to our layers, go to this layer where we have our leaf, swipe it from right to left and make a duplicate. It will look a little bit more crisp, so if you need to have more crispness, you are welcome to create as many copies as you need. And when you are done with creating the copies, go to the layers and merge them together. So tapping on the layer on the top using the option merge down. Now, when we have the result like that, let's get back our layer with our main line. So we will unhide it. And then we will need to go to all of the overlapping parts that we have right here. And we will need to go and erase the parts that we don't need. So we will have our leaf in that way on the top of our head, and we will need to go to the layer where we have our main lines and go and erase everything that we don't need. Also, we can, for now, when we have the lines, the main lines that we already have onto our screen, we can go and adjust the position of the leaf a little bit so it's not looking too weird. So we right now have a bit of the problem right here where we are touching the eyebrow, and a little bit of a problem right here where we are touching our lines that we have for our hair. That creates a bit of the tension right here, so we can go and adjust it again by going to our arrow key and maybe moving it a little bit or rotating it slightly so it's not going in that way. So for example, let's position it in that way. Let's tap onto our arrow key. Again, if you need to adjust the crispness, you can create one more layer on top and merge it together later on. If you are satisfied with everything, let's get back to our layers. Go to the layer where we have the main lines and use our eraser to erase all the overlapping parts. So go in very boldly like that and erasing the parts that we don't need. When we are done with this task, let's get back to our layers and let's find the layer where we have our sketch. So we will go to this layer number 3, for example, and we will hide it to see clearly what we have created with our lines. If we like how everything looks, we will go to this layer where we have the leaf. We will tap on it and we will use the option merge down. So all the lines that we have outside, so everything except the lines that we have for our pattern, is connected. is on one layer. So when we have the result like that, we are done with our lines, so we can move on to the coloring part. Let's start working on our base coloring by firstly going to our layers, and we will go and hide our layers with the scheme lines. So we will find these layers and we will go and hide them. When we did it, we want to go to our layer with the main lines. We will need to tap on it and we will use the option reference. So that way we'll be able to use these lines and add the colors on separate layers. Now when we did this, we will go underneath all the layers that we have for our lines, so all 3 of them, and from our layer where we had our sketch, we'll create one more layer here. When we did it, let's continue by going to our color palettes, and we will start from the bottom. So we will be going to the skin color firstly. We will go and add the color toward the skin to all the elements that we have for the skin. So one by one, going like that and starting to add the colors. When we are done with it, let's get back to our layers. We'll create one more layer on top and we will go to our color palettes to select the next color. So the next color, we will use our hair base color and we will go to all of the hair elements one by one again, and we will add the color to them too. So one by one, or either by dragging the color to one of the areas like that and then go into this color drop menu on the top. So we will use this continue filling option. When we're using continue filling option, we can go to some other elements that we want to recolor and tap on them. So go on like that and starting to recolor all the elements that belong to our hair. So go into these parts here too and adding the color to these 2 parts too. If you see that you have the line like that, so you have added the line, the color toward the lines too, you will need to go back to when you started to add the colors, and when you don't have this line, when your line, the main line that you've created, is crisp, go and start to add the colors to the rest of the elements too. Now when we are done with the base, let's tap onto our check mark if we were using our color drop option, and let's zoom in and we will see that we have some elements that we need to work on. So if you zoom in, you will see that some corners have the color that you need to add right here. So go to this part and recolor them. I also don't need the color right here toward this little part because it is our like cut right here. So I will go with the eraser and erase it, and then very easily going by one to all of the corners that are pretty sharp, and we will be adding the color manually if we need to. When we have the result like that, let's continue by going to our layers. We'll create one more layer on top, go into our color palette, and let's recolor this scarf. So let's find the color with the title scarf, and we'll go to the main shape of it, and we will recolor everything that we have right here. So again, either one by one or by going to continue filling, and we will add the colors toward all the elements that we have for our scarf. If you want to use multiple colors right here, you are welcome to change the color and add it in that way. When you are done with recoloring the scarf, let's get back to our layers and create one more layer on top, on which we will change the color to sweater base. With this color, we'll go to the sweater and we will recolor everything that belongs to our sweater. So again, either one by one or by using our continue filling option on the top, we will go and recolor everything. And when we are done with it, let's again go back to our layers and create one more layer on top, on which we will change the color to leaf 1, and we will recolor our leaf on the top. And when we have the result like that, we are done with the base colors. So let's start adding the details in the shape of the highlights and shadows and all the things like that. So to start with the highlights and shadows and everything like that, let's go toward our layers firstly, and we will go to this layer where we have our reference on. So on our layer with the lines, let's tap on it and let's turn off reference from this layer, and then we will start again from the bottom to start adding the details that we need. So firstly, going toward our layer where we have our skin, and let's create one more layer on top. To stay inside the shapes that we already recolored, let's do the following. We'll tap onto this layer that we've created and we will use the option clipping mask. When we have the clipping mask on, we will go to our color palette and we will select the color with the title skin shadow. With the skin shadow color, we will get back to our layers and we will change the blending mode right here because we want to add the shadows. It will be easier to do with a different blending mode. So let's tap onto the N icon and we will find the blending mode with the title multiply. We also will go to the opacity slider and we will change it to something around 60%. And now when we have the result like that, let's go and start adding a bit of shadows. So firstly, we will need to decide where we want to put our light source add. So for example, let's say that our light source is going to be on the top and on the left, and everything that we're going to be creating shadows wise and highlights wise should be in accordance with this light source. So let's start with the shadows on the skin, and we will need also to make sure that we understand that the hair is on top of our skin and everything that's on top of our skin is casting the shadow. So we will need to go toward these elements that we have, for example, for the fringe right here, and we will go a little bit lower than they are, and we will recreate the shape right here and add the shadow in that way. So with this color and with the same brush that you were using for the lining part, let's go and start adding the shadows to the skin. Let's go toward this little part, and again we will go and recreate the line right here, moving it a little bit lower. We will have this little leaf right here, the tip, and we will need to go underneath it, and in accordance with our light source, the imaginary light source, we will need to put the shadow here too. Let's work a little bit more onto this little part to soften it up, so we will avoid creating the very sharp corners, and we will go to some other elements and we will start to add the shadows here too. So let's go and thicken up the shadow right here, and then we also will need to go toward the ends right here, toward the edges, and we will go and create the shadows going in that way too. When we have it, we will go toward the ear and we will add the shadow here too. You can put completely in the shadow our ears and create something going in that way. When we are done with the first side, let's do the same onto the opposite side. So starting right here, starting to add the shadow onto the edges and trying to create the nice connections between the parts. So we are avoiding to create the elements like very sharp elements. And again, if we want, we can go and put the ear completely in a shadow. Now, when we have the result like that, let's go and add a bit of the blush toward our skin so it doesn't look too pale. Let's get back to our layers and let's get to the previous layer where we have the main layer for our skin. Let's create one more layer right here, and you will see that it automatically clipped to our previous layer. When we have it in that way, let's get back to our color palette and we will select the color with the title blush. We want to go to our brush library and we want to go to the airbrushing folder to select soft blend brush to create the very blushy effect onto our skin. So select the soft blend brush and let's go to the slider with the opacity and we will set it to something around 35%. We will go to the size slider, we will make it a little bit bigger, and we will start by going underneath the eyes and we will start to add the blush right here. So you can adjust the amount of blush that you want to add right here to your liking. Go a little bit higher with the amount or lower with amount and create something good in that way. When you are done with the first side, try to do something similar onto the opposite side too. When we have it, we also can add a bit of the blush right here where we have the nose area. So we can create a bit of the blushing effect here too. So very, very softly, probably not will be seen very clearly right here. So you can create a couple of lines like that and create a blushing effect going in that way. So when you are done, and if you feel that maybe you overdid it a little bit or it's not looking like too soft and too subtle, you can get back to your layers, go to the N icon right here and adjust the opacity of this layer so everything looks nice. When we have the result like that, we also will go toward the cheeks that we've created and we will put a bit of the lines that will again emphasize onto the blushing effect right here. So either on the same layer or on the new layer, we will get back to our brush library and we will go to our inking folder, we will select our technical pen one more time and we will go toward this elements that we've created for our cheeks and we will put the lines right here. So either with the same color or with the skin shadow color, for example, we can go toward this part and add a bit of the blushing like that. Try to create a couple of lines that will be quite parallel to one another. You can go with the bigger size, with the smaller size of this brush and with the elements that you're creating right now. Try something different if you prefer. Go to the opposite side and create something similar to what you've created onto the opposite side. Now, when we have the result like that, let's continue by going to our layers and we will go above the layer where we've added our little shadow onto the skin and we'll create one more layer here. When we are in this layer, we will go toward our eyes and we will add the whites of our eyes. So let's go firstly to our color palette and we will switch the color to white and we will go toward these areas where there is supposed to be the whites of our eyes and we will add it right here. So let's go and start to create it right here. Mostly what we are doing is we are putting the color toward the top and toward the left, and we are trying not to go too far beyond the element right here that we have for our iris. So let's go and work with our editing tool to create a nicely looking element and trying to create something in that way. Again, if it's not working from the first try, we can go and add the color firstly. So either manually or by looping this whole shape around and making sure that we don't have any gaps into our line, we can drag and drop the color in that way. And then if you see that something is off, you can go grab your eraser and erase the parts that you don't need. Again, work with your brush, work with your eraser, create a believable looking shape for these whites of the eyes, and do the same onto the bottom part too. When we are done on one side, we can either go and create manually the second eye, or again, we can go back to our layers, swipe the layer from right to left and choose the option duplicate. And when we have the second copy, go into our arrow key, flip horizontal and move the shape toward the opposite side. Try to follow these 3 lines that you have as your guiding lines, so you will be able to position your shape onto the opposite side on the same level that you have it onto the opposite side. So try to position it the same way, try to use the same size right here, the same continuation of the shape. When you are done, tap onto the arrow key, see whether you need to go and adjust some parts. If it's okay, go toward your layers, tap onto the layer on the top where you have the whites and connect it with the layer that you have on the bottom, so everything is on one layer. And now when we have the result like that, straight away, let's create one more layer on top. Tap on it and use the option clipping mask. We will tap onto the N icon and we will use the option multiply here, the blending mode. And for now, with opacity, let's go around 50%. When we have it, we will get back to our color palettes and we will select some color that we can use right here onto the tops to create some kind of the shadow here. So we can go very easily with, for example, blush color, so it will be quite subtle. And if you don't like this color, we can go with something different, so you can experiment again right here. We will get back to our brush library and we will go again to the airbrushing folder to select soft blend brush. Same settings, going toward the top and starting to add the shadowy part right here onto the top of the eyes. We don't need it to be very seen and very bright, so try to create it in a subtle way. If you already did it, go toward your layers, go to the opacity slider and adjust it from here. So we'll need to have a very subtle shape right here, subtle shadow. And when we have the result like that, let's continue by going to our layers and we will start to work onto our hair. So select the layer with the hair firstly, create one more layer on top, tap on it, use the option clipping mask. When we have it, we will tap onto our N icon and we will adjust the blending mode to multiply. And firstly, we will set the opacity to something around 35%. When we have it, we will get back to our color palettes and we will select the hair deep shadow color. We also will get back to our brush library and we will go again to the inking folder and either select technical pen, or if you want to have a bit bigger size of the brush, you can go with the studio pen. You can adjust it the same way as you have adjusted your technical pen. So tap on the brush, go inside the brush studio, adjust the amount of streamline, amount of stabilization. You can reduce it a little bit so it will be easier for you to create the elements. So for example, let's go with something like that. Remember that you can always get back to this option and adjust it later on if you need to. So for example, let's set it in that way. Let's tap onto our done button over the top and let's start by going and adding some kind of the tint into our hair. So firstly, very boldly, let's go with the big size of the brush and we will put this part completely in the shadow. Again, we are working in accordance with our light source that we've created in our imagination that we have on our top left. And when we have the result like that, let's grab our eraser and we will go toward this part and we will add some kind of the interest toward the picture by creating some kind of cuts right here. For example, we can go toward this part and we can create something in that way. So we are creating something similar to what we have outside. We can create some kind of lines like that, create the cuts. And when we have it, we can go toward the top and create something, for example, like that. So these parts that we are cutting right now will be some kinds of the very subtle highlights. So for these highlights, or some kind of the highlights, we will go towards the middle part and we will cut it completely. If you already did it, either work with your brush and with your eraser to create a nicer looking element. So if you have something like that, we can go and sharpen it up by using our brush and creating the nicely looking lines. When we have it, let's get back to our brush and actually we'll go and completely put this whole area that we have onto our left in the shadow. So you can go with the brush like that, you can go and loop this whole shape around and then drag and drop the color inside. When we have it, we can go to some other areas and do the same thing here. So for example, let's go toward this bottom part onto the opposite side and do the same thing here. So we are looping the shape around. We are trying to not have any gaps into this line that we are creating. We might not see what we are doing right here, but we are not lifting up our brush and we are connecting it with this line that we created on the first place, so the starting point, and we can go and add the color inside when we are ready. If it's not happening, we can go and actually we can see where we have the gap. So we will need to go back to our layers, tap onto the layer where we have our shadows, use the option clipping mask to release it, and you will see that you are creating the actual shape right here. And where you have the gap, you will go and edit, drag and drop the color inside, and if you want, you can get back to your layers, tap onto this layer and use the option clipping mask one more time to see only the areas that are clipped. And now when we have it, we also can go to some areas right here onto the top, for example, and put the elements that are in a complete shadow, So for example, all the elements that we have behind right here, near the ears, everything that we have in the back. So we can go and add the shadows in that way here too. We also can go right here toward the top and add the color right here. Going toward this element that we have as our free little part, we can go and create some kind of the shadow going in that way. We can go to some strands of hair and create the little shadows following the direction that we have for our strands of hair and create something going in that way. Now, when we have the result like that, let's get back to our layers and we will add one more layer of shadows. So everything will be a little bit more deep. We will get back to the plus icon. We will create a new layer on top. Again, tapping on the layer using the option clipping mask, go into the N icon, changing the blending mode to multiply. And this time, let's go to the opacity slider and set the level of opacity to something around 55%. Using the same color, going towards some of the elements, and we will be adding our deeper shadows right here. So firstly, let's go toward this little part that we have in the back, and we will start to add the shadows here. So going in that way, remembering where we have our little light source and starting to add the shadows in accordance with it. So for example, let's add the shadow here to all of these strands of hair that we've added manually, like the parts behind the ear and everything like that. And then let's go toward these little parts and let's start to add the peculiar looking shadow right here. So for example, we will start by following the direction that we have for our hair, and then we'll create something similar to what we have created right here. So following the direction and then going around the whole shape and again looping it and creating the shadow in that way. Drag and drop the color inside. If you want to go to some other lines that you've created or create them in a different way or maybe adjust them, go with your brush and with your eraser to create a nicer looking shapes. When we are done with it, let's go toward the bottom part and let's start from the top to create our shadows here too. So first we'll go to this little part that we've some kind of created a cut into, and then we will go toward the bottom and we will create a big shadow going in that way. So again, looping the shape around and drag and dropping the color inside. If you want to adjust something, go with your eraser and erase the parts that you don't need. So for example, we can go right here, we can erase the line right here and create a better shadow. We also can go toward these little parts where we have the double shadows, and with the smaller size of the eraser, we can go and work onto them so we don't have this overlapping part. And again, we can create some kinds of the highlights onto other elements too. So for example, we have created this deeper shadow going along the whole shape that we have right here on the bottom, but we can cut it a little bit and create some kinds of the difference in the colors and interest to our picture. When we have it in that way, let's go underneath our little leaf that we have on the top. And again, in accordance with our light source, we will need to add the shadow underneath our leaf too. So we're going below the shape and we are following the same lines that we have for our leaf. So going like that and starting to add the shadow. Now when we have it, let's go and add a deeper shadow right here to these folds that we have on the top, and also we can go toward this little part and add a bit of the shadows to them too. So going on the bottom and adding a bit of the shadows right here. We also can go right here underneath this little comb part on the top and add a bit of the shadow over the top too, so it will be some kind of casting the shadow over this element. When we have it, let's also go toward this little part. Let's start to add the shadow to it too. So for example, let's go with something going in that way, very softly going and starting to create a nicely looking shapes. Again, working with our brush and with our eraser to create the shapes that we like. Let's get back to our brush and let's continue by going to this area that we have onto our fringe, and we will go and create the shadow going in that way. So we are again working with the shapes that we already created. They are some kinds of rounded. We want everything to be pretty rounded right here. So we are creating the shadows in the same way. When we have it, we also will go to all of the bottom parts right here of all the strands of hair that we have, and we will be adding the shadows to these parts too. Again, very accurately working with our brush and with our eraser to create nicely looking elements. Let's go toward this little part, put it completely in a shadow, and then we will deal with this little strand of hair that we have as our part that is going toward the scarf. So let's go from the middle part right here, and we will create the line going in that way, following the same direction that this element has, and we are emphasizing it, we are adding a shadow going in that way. When we have it, let's go to this strand of hair and we will put this element in a shadow in that way. So again, something similar to what we have onto our fringe. You can go with the bigger shapes, with the smaller shapes, it's up to you. Try to create them in a nice way, in a soft way, in a smooth way. And when we have it on this strand of hair, let's go to the next one and let's create the similar shadow to what we have right here onto this little element. So again, creating something rounded, going toward the bottom, adding the color manually. And one by one, let's go to the rest of the elements and let's start to add the shadows to them too. So for example, going in that way, if you want, we can go toward this little part and add a bit of the shadow here too. We will have a very nicely looking difference in colors right here. And then going toward this little part, adding a bit of the shadow here. So firstly, going toward the shape and adding the shadow, and then going underneath the shape to cast the shadow right here. And when we have it, we will do something similar to what we have right here onto this little part too. So for example, firstly, let's go toward this little part. Let's add a bit of the second layer of shadows, starting to create something like that, creating the interest, going through all of this little part and starting to add the shadows here too. So let's go with the triangular shapes like that. Try to make them in a triangular way so they are looking nice with the overall shape, so not a straight triangle, but the triangle that is following the direction of the whole strand of hair that you have right here. We also will need to add the shadows right here underneath the strand that we have on the top, so we will need to follow the direction of these elements right here onto the top part. Let's finish up with the shadows by adding the shadow right here onto this little strand of hair. Let's take a look at it. If we need to go and adjust some parts, we'll go and adjust them. If we see that everything looks pretty nice, if you want, you can go and maybe adjust the amount of opacity so it's not that dark. But if it's okay to you, let's get back to our lace and let's create one more layer on top. We will tap on it, we will use the option clipping mask, and we will go and change the color to our yellowish something. So for example, let's go with scarf 1, and we will also go to our layers back. So we will go to the N icon on this new layer and we will change the blending mode to overlay. We'll keep the opacity at maximum for now, but we will go to our brush library, we'll go to the airbrushing folder, soft blend brush, and we will go with a bigger size of the brush to the areas that are not in a shadow, so on the opposite side to the elements that we have right here. And we will start to add some highlights in that way, very soft ones. So firstly, going over the top where we don't have any shadows and starting to add the shadows highlights here. So let's go with even bigger size of the brush, and we will start to add the peculiarly looking little highlights in that way. Very softly looking, very nicely looking. We can go to some other elements right here, for example, on the opposite side, and we can go to the areas where we have only one layer of our shadows. So for example, going right here, adding a bit of the reflection right here, going toward these little parts, very nice touch with our highlights right here. Try to make super nicely looking connections between the color, transition between the colors. Try to make them very, very smooth. When we have the result like that, we also can go right here toward this tip. Decide whether you like the color that you use right now. If you want to change it, we can go and very easily do it by going to our Magic Wand tool, go into the hue, saturation, and brightness, and go to the sliders right here and adjust the color right here. So for example, we can go a little bit like different with the color, or very subtly add a bit more like an orangey color right here toward this part that we've created. Again, you can go to the saturation slider, brightness slider, adjust it to your liking. When we have the color that we like, let's straight away go to our layers, and we will create one more layer on top. Let's tap on the layer, clip in mask, same blended mode that we have right now, but we will go to our color palettes and select the color with the title Hair Highlights. With this color and with the brush that we used before, so go into our brush library, go into the inking folder, studio pen or technical pen brush. So if you want to create the highlights in a very smooth way as we have created our lines, you are welcome to select the technical pen brush. Let's go toward the areas that are opposite from our shadows, and we will start to add the highlights here. So let's mostly go toward the top parts that we have right here onto the left, and we will be going again to the opposite sides. We are going along the elements that we have right here, trying to create the similar looking lines right here, and we are starting to add the highlights. You can change the size of the highlights. You can go with the thick ones, you can go with the thin ones. You are welcome to create them in any size that you prefer. For example, we can go onto this one and maybe create it in a bit of the thicker way. With these highlights that you are creating, try not to go to the shadows, because it won't be very believable that you have highlights into the shadows. When we have the result like that, let's continue by going over the top, and we will add even bigger highlight right here. So where we have the shadow, we will start by going over the top of it, and then we will go over the top, and we will start to create the highlight here too. So we can even go and start to create the highlight going in a very big way, so going along the top part of our shadow like that, and trying to connect it with the color that we used for our highlights. So going like that, either manually or by going along the whole shape and creating the seamless line, adding the color in that way. So trying to create the nicely looking highlight right here. When we have it, let's go and see where we want to put the highlights even more. If you see that you can go with your eraser, for example, and create a different shape of the highlight, maybe a little bit more of a curvy one to emphasize the shape that you have right here onto the hair, you can go and do that. When we have it, let's continue creating this highlight right here over this little part. So again, something a little bit thicker. When we have it, we will need to nicely connect it with the shadow right here. So go along the shape and start to create something going like that. And when we have it, we also can go and create a different shape for the highlight. For example, going like that and creating a very big highlight going in that way. Let's create a rounder shape. Let's drag and drop the color inside. And let's go over the top right here and create a couple of more highlights here. So going on the same level, and we are going not in a straight line, but more like on the curve. So going a little bit lower onto this little part and creating a bigger highlight here too. Bigger than the elements that we already have, smaller than the highlight that we have right here onto the left. When we have it, we can go toward this little part and create the little highlight here too. You can go with a simple shape of the circle or create something a little bit more peculiar. Again, work with your brush, work with your eraser. If you already did it, you can go and erase the parts that you don't need. So try to create something nicely looking. If you want, you also can go and maybe add the smaller elements right here. So for example, something like that, a little bit of the sparkly little shapes. When we have it, we will go to these little parts and we will start to add the highlights here too. So very subtle, go and create the highlights going in that way. Again, try not to go to the areas where you have the shadows. Let's go through all of these three elements and let's add the highlights to the opposite side from our shadows. And then let's continue by going to this little part. We will add the highlight here. And if you want to go to some other areas, for example, maybe right here on the top, add a subtle highlight here, you are welcome to go and do that. You can even go to the opposite side and add a couple of highlights here. So for example, maybe we can go to this little part that is kind of separate, and we can add a bit of the highlight onto this little part. Now, when we have the result like that, we are kind of done with our highlights, but we can go and create the highlights in a different shape. So for example, you can go under the description and download the folder with the brushes. We will go and select the brush with the title Sparkle Thin Full. And with the same color, we will go to some of the areas that we have onto our hair, and we will create some kind of the sparkles right here to create a very cute illustration. So for example, let's go right here, maybe with slightly bigger size of the brush, go into some of the areas and starting to add the highlights. Let's try not to overdo it. Let's create, for example, 3 of these elements all around our hair. So if you see that there is the area where there is supposed to be a little highlight, or if it looks a little bit too open and to blend right here, you are welcome to go and add a couple of highlights to these areas. For example, let's go also to this little part, maybe with slightly smaller size of the brush. And if you want to add a couple of more, you are welcome to go and do that. So now when we have the result like that, let's get back to our brush that we used before. So we are again going to our inking folder, either technical pen brush or studio pen brush, and let's continue to add more of the shadows. So what we have next is our layer with the scarf. So let's go and create one more layer right here on the top of it. We'll tap on it, clipping mask, go into the N icon and changing the blending mode to multiply. Let's go to the opacity slider and let's set it to something around maybe 50-60%. We will go to the color palettes and we will select the different color. So for example, we can go with a bit of the darker color than we have it for the scarf. So for example, leaf or leaf 2. And we will go again in accordance with our light source and we will start to add the shadows here too. Firstly, let's go to the areas where we have the parts that are overlapped on top. So to the strands of hair right here, we will go and create the shadows underneath them. Let's go to all of them. We probably have only one. We will go and continue adding the shadows to other elements. So for example, we can go and start to separate the parts right here, like creating the parts going in that way. You can go a little bit farther beyond the frames right here, create something going like that, going to the bottom, creating another little shadow on the bottom too. We also can go a little bit to the top of this part and we can add a bit of the shadow underneath the first element that we have on the top, and then go on to the next side and starting to add the shadows here too. So for example, on the bottom, let's create the rounder shape like that. We will add the shadow toward the whole element right here that we've created. So going in that way, adding the color, if we need to change something, working with our eraser and cutting the parts that we don't need. And as for this little part, we will firstly need to go and add the shadow toward this little loop that we have right here and towards the part that is underneath the overlapping part, and then maybe soften it up on the corners and create something going like that. As for the top part, let's again make sure that you recolor this element that you have for this little loop, and then we can go over the top and add a bit of the shadow right here onto the top. So let's add the color going in that way. And if you think that maybe the loop that we've created right here is a little bit too similar color-wise to what we have outside, we can fix it later on. Firstly, let's finish up with adding the colors to the main elements. So now let's continue by adding the shadow going along the edge right here. So again, trying to soften up everything, creating something going in that way. We can go toward this little part and add a shadow going like that. For example, when we have it, going toward the part that we have right here, the free part right here, and we will go and put it completely in the shadow. As for these parts, again, we can go and either put them completely in the shadow or add something similar to what we have right here onto this side. And as for the strands that we have right here, we will need to treat them as they are singular elements. So firstly, I will go and add a bit of the rounder shadow right here onto the bottom, so everything looks very nice and very soft. And then going one by one to all of these little hanging pieces, and we will start to add the shadows to them in that way. So treat them individually. When we have the result like that, let's go and change the color to something darker. So for example, orange lines, and we will go toward this little part that we have for our inside part and add the color to make it a little bit more bright. If this color is not enough, go with even darker colors, so blush lines or red lines, and go toward this part and try to put it in a shadow so it looks believable. When we have it in that way, let's go to our next layer, which is our layer with our sweater, and we will create one more layer on top. Tap on it, clip in mask, go into our color palettes and changing the color firstly to this sweater base. Let's also get back to our layers and change the blending mode to multiply, and we will set the opacity to something around 40%. And now with this color, let's go towards the sleeve firstly, and we will add the shadow to it too. So again, in accordance with our light source, we will go and start to create the shadows mostly onto the bottom right, and we will drag and drop the color when we are ready. We will go toward this little part and we will put it in the shadow. You can go again individually onto this little part and add a bit of the shadows going in that way. So something similar to what we have created for our little hanging pieces onto this scarf. When we have it, we can also go toward this little part and we can add a bit of the shadows going in that way to create some kind of the folds or something looking like a fold. And when we have it, we also will go toward this little part and we will add the shadow here. Now let's get back to our color palettes and we will select some darkish color. So for example, let's try this dark brown lines color and we will go toward these elements and we will go and add the shadows here. So firstly, going underneath our little sleeve and we will add the shadow to these parts. So going like that, adding the color, and going underneath the elements that we have for our scarf and going and adding the shadows underneath them, following what we have right here for these elements. So going like that, repeating the shapes of them and creating our shadows. If you don't want to do that, we can go and simplify it a little bit by going along this whole shape and we can put, for example, this part in the shadow. Take a look at it from the distance, decide whether you maybe want to go and adjust some parts, if you want to go and adjust it. And when we have the result like that, let's also add a bit of the highlight right here onto the sleeve. So we will get back to our layers, create one more layer on top, tap on it, clip in mask, go into our brush library, go into the airbrushing folder, soft blend brush, go into the color that will be suitable here. So for example, let's go with something around scarf or maybe hair highlights. We can try it out with this color and then by using our hue, saturation, brightness adjusted. So let's get back to our brush and very easily with the bigger size of the brush, let's go toward this part where we don't have our shadows and we will start to add a bit of the highlight right here. You can soften up the shadow that you have right here onto the left to create some kind of the nicely looking element. Try not to overdo it. When you have it, if you don't like the color, go toward the adjustments, hue, saturation, and brightness and play a bit with the hue or something else right here. So for example, we can go a bit more reddish onto these elements. We can play a bit with the saturation too and create some kind of the warm effect right here. When we are done, tapping onto our magic wand tool to get away from this mode. And then we will go and start working onto our leaf. So firstly, go into our layers, go into our layer where we have the leaf, creating one more layer on top, tap in, clip in mask, go into our color palette to select the secondary color for our leaf. So we used leaf 1 for the base, so let's go and select leaf 2. Make sure that we are using soft blend brush, going from the top and starting to add the secondary color right here. Again, try to make a very soft transition between the colors. Try to add the more bright color right here onto the top and kind of reduce the opacity right here onto the bottom. Now, when we have the result like that, we are done with the shadows and highlights on the main part. So let's go and work a little bit onto the lines that we have right here. So firstly, let's go to these layers that we have for our scarf and let's go and change the colors of our lines right here. So let's go to one of the layers. So for example, this one with the bigger elements, and let's go and select the color for it. So before doing it, we will go and create one more layer on top, tap on the layer and use the option clipping mask. Now let's go to our color palettes, and for example, let's select this blush lines color. Let's very simply drag and drop the color toward our screen, and we will recolor everything that we have right here. When we did it, if you don't want to have super many layers right here and something looking like that, you can go and tap onto this layer where you've changed the color and use the option merge down to recolor the lines. And now when we did it, let's do the same with the second layer. So again, creating one more layer on top, tapping, using clipping mask and changing the color to, for example, white. Drag and drop the color to the areas, to the whole screen that you have right here. Go toward the layers, go and tap onto this layer, use the option merge down, and also you can go and adjust the opacity of this layer to create a softer look. So when you are done with it, let's go and work a little bit onto the lines that we have onto our face, and we will add a bit of the color toward our eyes. So firstly, going toward our layer that we have for our lines, we will create one more layer on top, tapping, using clipping mask, and firstly go into our color palettes to select a different color. So for example, let's go with this either orange lines or red lines color. You can experiment again using our soft blend brush and going from the bottom and starting to add the secondary color toward the eyes. Let's go with slightly smaller size of the brush, maybe not that small, a little bit bigger, going like that from the bottom and starting to add the secondary color. So again, adding more color toward the bottom and then kind of receding it on the top. So create something going like that. If you recolored it and if you want to maybe change the color, you are welcome to go to your adjustments, hue, saturation, and brightness, and play with the hue that you have right here. For example, let's go a little bit more orangey right here onto the eyes. So for example, something going in that way. And when we have it, let's straight away go to our layers and create one more layer on top. Again, tapping on the layer and using the option clipping mask. Now let's change the color to something pretty soft. So something that we have onto our leaf, for example. Let's go with the color with the title leaf 1. With this color, let's get back to our brush library, going again to our inking folder, either studio pen brush or technical pen brush, going toward the bottom part of our eyes right here, and we will add the secondary little element right here. So let's go around and create the ellipse, going toward the editing tool if we need to adjust it. So position it nicely, take a look at it from the distance if you need to, create something going like that, not too big, not too small, so something going in that way. When you are done, tap on the screen and drag and drop the color inside. Now, if you want, you can go and manually recreate the same thing onto the opposite side, or we can go again to our layers. Swipe the layer from right to left, choose the option duplicate, go toward our arrow key, flip horizontal, go toward the second eye that we have right here, and try to position this element on the same level and on the same place that we have our opposite side created, like, you understand. When we have it, we will go to our layers and we will merge these two layers together. So tapping on the layer on the top using the option merge down. Now, when we are done with it, let's go and create one more layer on top. And onto this layer, again, tapping on it using clipping mask, go into our color palette, selecting white color, going toward the top parts of our eyes, and we will create the highlights right here. So for example, let's go with slightly smaller size of the brush, going toward the top onto the left eye, creating a big highlight like that. Holding it, go into our editing tool if we need to adjust it. If you see that you have not even line, go manually and recreate the line so it looks seamless, and then drag and drop the color inside. Go and create one more little highlight closer to this big one, or if you want to maybe create the highlights with this brush that we used before, the sparkly one, go and use it right here. You can explore the folder and maybe pick up some other elements and put the highlights with the shapes from this folder. When you are done with the first side, again, go into our layers, swiping the layer from right to left, duplicate, go into our arrow key and moving this element to the opposite side and trying to position it on the same level. When we have it, go into our layers, merging these two layers together. So tap on the layer, merge down, take a look at everything from the distance. And also let's go and recolor some of the lines that we have onto our face. Let's create one more layer on top, tap, clipping mask, changing the color to, for example, red lines, and going toward this mouth that we have and recoloring it. Making sure that we are using the brush that is working onto our canvas, so going like that and recoloring the elements that we have right here. And also let's go to our color palettes and select the color that will be a little bit lighter. So for example, skin shadow color, and we will go towards the lids that we have right here and we will recolor them. Also, we can go and add a bit of the nose right here, like a very soft dot right here. Let's get back to our layers and let's get back to the layers that we have for our, for example, shadows onto our skin. When we are in this layer, let's go a little bit higher than we have our mouth on, and we will go and put a little dot right, maybe not that big. We will go and create a small dot right here to create some kind of the nose. You can go with a bigger size, smaller size, position differently this element, it's up to you. When we have the result like that, let's finish up with our lines by going again to our layers above everything that we have. We'll create one more layer on top, tap, clipping mask, go into our brush library and go into again airbrush and folder to select soft blend brush. We will go to our color palettes and we will be softening up some lines that we have right here by going and selecting the red lines, for example. Firstly, going with the bigger size of the brush, go into the areas where we want to soften up our lines. So mostly to the areas where we have the highlights and something like that, softening up some of the lines very softly. Going toward the leaf, for example, we can add the different color right here toward the elements that we have inside. You can go to some other elements, for example, to the scarf right here and maybe soften it up too by recoloring the lines. So you can go like that very softly. You don't need to recolor the lines fully. You can go like very softly and create some kinds of the different color by creating the transition between the colors. We also can go right here and soften up some of the elements. So probably go somewhere where you have the highlights and recolor the lines right here. If you want to try out some other colors, maybe even more soften it up, you can go again to the color palette, explore the folder right here, explore maybe the orange lines color, go to some of the elements right here and soften it up even more where you have the highlights, for example. When we have the result like that, let's finish up by going to our brush library. We'll again go to the calligraphy folder and we will select script brush. With the script brush and with the color, for example, leaf or leaf 2, let's create one more layer on top and let's go outside the shape and we will create a couple of details here. So for example, going like that and starting to create a couple of leaf looking elements in that way. So we are reducing the pressure that we are putting onto our brush at the end and we are creating some kind of details like that. You can go with a bigger size of the brush and create it in a bigger way. So let's go and create a couple of details going in that way. And also you can go not only with these elements, you can go with some dots, or if you want, you can explore the folder that you downloaded to create some elements going outside. And in the very end, if you see that maybe you want to go and adjust some parts, we can go and do it very easily again with our Liquify tool. So for example, I would want to go and maybe adjust the part right here where we have the scarf. So we will go again to our list and we will need to select every layer that belongs to our girl. So when the first one is selected, we will go to the next one, swiping from left to right, going like that for all of the layers that we have right here, and we will need to select everything that we have. So when we reach the layer, when we are at the skin, we can go and hit group right here. So everything is inside the group and we don't need to go and one more time select everything. We can go and only select the new group right here. When everything is selected, we again can go to our adjustments, Liquify tool, adjust the size of the brush, for example, and very nicely, very easily go to some of the elements and adjust them. So if you need to adjust some parts, go and do it with the Liquify tool. So for example, we can also go towards the mouth right here and maybe adjust the smile. So you can spend some time here and adjust some elements if you want to do that. So for example, the scarf, the mouth. If you want to adjust some other elements, you are welcome to go and do that. When we are done with it, we can get back to our layers and we can go and maybe if we want to adjust something manually, for example, again, the smile or something else, we can go and create final touches right here, final adjustments with our brush and with our eraser. So for example, let's get back to the inking folder, select our technical pen brush, go to the layers, go toward our layer that we have for our lines. And if you want to adjust the mouth, for example, we will select the color that we used for the mouth, so red lines, and we will go and adjust it very easily. So work with your brush and work with your eraser to achieve the result that you like. And when you don't have any more places that you need to fix, we are done with our illustration. I hope you are proud of your result. Share it on socials and tag me so I can see your beautiful creations. And if you enjoyed this video, you can find more similar kawaii tutorials on my Skillshare or on Patreon at the link in the description. Thank you for watching and I'll see you in the next tutorial.